Okay, so the other day I was talking about chauvinism and this kind of mentality. I'm not like sure what else to call it. This holier than thou, I'm better than you mentality. Bigotry, really, is what it is. It's bigotry, and I feel that it's really like a plague on the earth. But there's the other side of it too. Like there's the other side of the coin that is more of like a victim, I guess, a victim mentality, which is also self-importance. And that's what I want to talk about today is self-importance, okay? Because it's all tied to self-importance, and we have a epidemic of self-importance on the planet, or whatever, the earth realm, whatever you want to call it. So we're living now in the time of the great change, the time of the change of heart. The human animal is undergoing a massive change of heart. The human animal is undergoing a massive change of heart. So that means that we are reorienting. I am reorientating myself. You are reorienting yourself, and I'm inviting you to reorient yourself to yourself. And that means we're going to have to look at this issue of self-importance, ego, victimhood, bigotry. All of those things have to really come under the microscope at this time. So I want to talk a little bit about that. I was defining chauvinism and bigotry as this mentality of like, I'm gonna get me, I'm gonna get mine, I'm gonna look out for my little clique and fuck everybody else. If you can't handle that, you're just a loser, and you just need to try harder. I don't really care what happens. You can go die in the gutter, and fuck you. That type of thing, right? Which is self-importance or aspect of self-importance. So Don Juan did say that he did feel that self-importance is the greatest enemy that mankind has. And his basic argument was that ordinary socialization, the way our parents raised us, the way we learned to be, the way we were socialized through school, through our typical communities, ordinary socialization trains us to regard the personal self, our injuries, opinions, status, desires, grievances, and reputation as enormously consequential. Okay? A warrior systematically dismantles that orientation. So, Don Juan's answer to self importance was really the humility of the warrior, becoming a warrior. So, the counter state is the humility of the warrior, but his humility, the humility as Don Juan described it, is not the conventional sense of humility where you think of like being meek or thinking yourself than less than, or thinking poorly of yourself. It simply means recognizing that you are no more or less important than anything else in existence. So it's like the chauvinism of the right tends to be like, yeah, I'm bigger and better than you, fuck you. You got a problem with me, I'll bomb you, I'll bomb your country, right? That tends to be more of like the chauvinism of the right. Whereas the humility of the left tends to be more like, oh, humans are a plague on the earth. We're just a parasite that needs to be, crushed. We're so small. Like liberals will always be like, they'll like look at the planet. They'll be like, look at the universe. You are here. You're tiny. You're nothing. Like that's still an ego-driven perspective, because the fact of the matter is that you are no less important than anything else, but you're no more important than anything else either. So it's a double-edged sword. So the humility of the warrior, it dovetails with what Don Juan called impeccability, which my understanding of impeccability is just doing your best within the given whatever the situation requires. You're going to do your best to achieve that. Just doing your best within any given situation. That is impeccability, and everyone can be impeccable. You have a personal best that you can offer, and if you're doing that, that's all you can do, and that's what being impeccable is all about. So some examples of that, or things that go with that, would be erasing personal history. Okay, so weakening the socially constructed identity you constantly maintain. So these are ways that we can eliminate self-importance within us. And those of us that are going to overthrow the cult of ego, the cult of Baal, because I do think the Baal worshippers, the death cult that controls human civilization, is essentially a cult of self-importance. It is a cult of narcissism. So we're going to overcome them by overcoming the self-importance in ourselves, which will then allow us to do what needs to be done, and then not become like them. Because that's the thing, that's something that I'm thinking about. Is like, what happens if I actually become powerful? When I become powerful and wealthy, what happens when my side starts to gain ground and we're defeating the enemy? We're defeating Baal. We're defeating the armies of Baal. How are we going to make sure that we don't become like them? Which is very important, right? And how we're going to do that is by erasing self-importance within ourselves. So erasing personal history, or defeating the self-importance, becoming warriors who are humble in the true sense. So we're going to do that by erasing personal history, which means weakening the socially constructed identity we constantly maintain. Weakening the socially constructed identity we constantly maintain. Losing self-importance is ceasing to organize experience around me and what happens to me. We're going to get into that in a little bit more. Using death as an advisor. Okay, so I'm probably going to go for a walk. There's a graveyard pretty close by here, and later today I'm going to go for a stroll in that graveyard and just sit with my death, because I have to remember that by remembering my mortality, it strips grievances and vanity of their apparent importance. Okay. Just because somebody did something to me, or I did something to somebody else, like, I'm going to be dead very soon. So why am I giving that any power? Why am I obsessing about these stupid little grievances that happen to me on a personal level? I have way more important things to be worrying about. I don't have time to be worrying about these stupid little grievances, right? And neither do you, because death is stalking us on the left. Taking responsibility for your actions. Now, here's one that is a tough one. Very interesting one. Paradoxically, losing self-importance does not mean becoming passive. The warrior acts decisively because he assumes responsibility without indulging himself. All right, that's really what we're gonna dive in here too, because for me, that's something that is sort of, I struggle with that. There's some kind of weird catch-22 there, but we're going to dive into that. And then impeccability, as I said, self-importance and self-pity are dismantled. As self-importance and self-pity are dismantled, the warrior moves towards a state of impeccability, using energy deliberately and effectively rather than wasting it to maintain ego. So, let's see here. Where do I want to go from here? So taking responsibility, right? That's something that I'm always like, how do you take responsibility for the situation without being like egotistical about it, or without being self-important about it, right? So responsibility. This is the situation. This is the action. I accept the consequences. Okay. Self-indulgence would be, now I'm going to construct an elaborate story around the situation and what this says about me. So, you know what I'm saying? There's two different things. So, like, for instance, you lose your job. Self-indulgence. They screwed me. They don't appreciate what I bring. This always happens to me. Right? Warrior responsibility, taking responsibility for the situation, would look more like, I'm out of work. Whatever the reason, this is now the situation. Okay, what's my next move? Okay, and just making a plan and carrying out that plan without getting caught in narratives that are spiraling within you, right? Um, yeah, extract the lesson of what is most useful through then act. Extract the lesson that is most useful, then act. All right. So the next one is, you seriously screw something up. Let's say you did something really bad. All right. You seriously screwed something up, whatever that may be. Right. Self-importance wants to replay the scenario over and over again, or you might like guilt. Obsessive guilt is another form of self-indulgence, right? I would say that the left, more liberal-minded type people tend to be more like that. They get caught, they'll get hyper fixated on the pain, or just feeling bad about, feeling guilty over things, rather than just being like, hey, this happened, right? What am I going to do about it right now? I'm such a terrible person. They might, oh, I'm such a terrible person. Like, they're still fixating on the self. Whereas a responsible warrior approach would be, yeah, I did that, or, that happened. Someone did that. It hurts. I hurt people, or that hurt people, cause harm, whatever. I'm going to repair what I can, right? I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to alter my behavior accordingly. So it's, you're not making excuses. There's no theatrical self-punishment, right? You're just like looking at the situation as it is and handling it. Now, I'm not saying there isn't a place and a time to feel, because it's like you're not a robot. I guess that's where it gets kind of interesting, and that it gets difficult, because you're not a robot. Like, if you do something terrible and people get hurt and now your life is fucked up because of it, and you have to deal with all these consequences, like, you're going to feel feelings, right? You're going to have feelings, so that's why it's so important that we have ways to process these feelings, that you have a place you can go. You have a group of people who you can lean on to help you process these feelings, because that way you can process those feelings there. And the more you do that, the easier it's going to be for you to act strategically and impeccably. You know what I'm saying? That to me, that is like the true purpose of quote unquote therapy. It isn't so that you can just languish in the same old thing over and over again. It's so that you can process the feelings that you didn't necessarily get to process when the events actually occurred. You know what I'm saying? And that will in turn allow you to act more impeccably. Someone insults or humiliates you. A self-important approach would be like, oh, who does he think he is? How dare he insult me? And then you're talking to yourself about for hours and hours, or coming up with terrible plans to get even with this person. Once again, you have to somehow process that stuff so that you can get it out of you. And the more you do that, the easier it will be just to let it pass through you. A higher, skilled operator will just be able to be like, okay, well, this person insulted me or humiliated me in public. Do I need to address this? Does this actually need to be addressed? Is there something that I need to do about this? Or can I, or does it need to do I need to just like let it go and move on? Is this so trite and trivial that it's just not worth my time at all? And so you're looking at the situation as it is, and allowing the situation to dictate the response, rather than coming to it from a place of wounded ego. You know what I'm saying? From a place of like a wounded child, or a sense of self, quote unquote. So, yeah, that kind of gets into the Machiavellian stuff. But the Machiavellian stuff has more to do with like, what do you do when you need to act? Someone has slighted you in public, and like, this is a problem. This is, it needs to be addressed. And then, you would use the Machiavellian playbook at that time, right? If indeed it was something that required that, right? But that's a whole nother can of worms. And Machiavelli and Don Juan, they do dovetail. Don Juan's Art of Stalking and Machiavellian's strategic approach, his strategy. There's definitely some overlap there, which is fascinating, but we'll save that for another time. So, yeah. Impeccability allows you to conserve energy by eliminating all the unnecessary psychological commentary between perception and action. You can acknowledge that something is genuinely unfair. You can acknowledge that something has happened to you without needing to deny the unfairness, right? So, I will use the Baal worshiping death cult as the example. Like, they have perpetrated terrible crimes against humanity, against you, against me. They continue to perpetrate horrific crimes. And yes, something needs to be done about that, right? But we don't need to get, I don't need to, you don't need to get our identities so obsessed with what they've done to us that it becomes like our whole identity becomes wrapped up in that. All we need to do is assess what has happened, assess what is happening, and then take steps accordingly. Look at the situation as it is strategically and think, what do we now actually need to, how can we actually deal with this in an effective manner? You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I think that's all I got for now. But I just wanted to share that because I think it's critical, man. And I think we're at a time where we really can address this self-importance, this cult of ego, this cult of narcissism, and on a global level, and win. I think that we can. I don't think necessarily everyone has to do it, but the few will always govern the many. The few will always determine the future course of history for everyone else. So it doesn't take but a small handful of us to absolutely upheave the social order as we know it. And we're going to do that by unwinding the self-importance within ourselves and acting as impeccable warriors. Hey, have a good day.